First, I will ask that you please turn your cell phones off or place them on silent. Me too. June 16, 2019 regular meeting of the Chatham County Savannah Metropolitan Planning Commission will now come to order. Please stand for the invocation and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
We thank you, O Lord, for the good weather. We thank you for the midst of the hurricane, all the blessing goes with it. Give us the desire and the wisdom to make honest and fair decisions. Also, Lord, look on our servicemen and women who serve this country for our benefit. We ask this in your name. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. There's a sign-in sheet near the door to the hearing room. Please sign the sheet to record your attendance at today's meeting. For those of you who would like to speak, we ask that you sign one of our blue speaker cards. Give the blue speaker card to a staff member at the front table so we can call your name at the appropriate time. There are agendas on the table outside near the door to the hearing room. To outline the order in which the meeting is conducted, each petition has a report presented by staff to the board providing information on the petition. After staff presentation, board members may ask questions of staff regarding the presentation for clarification. Petitioner then offered an opportunity to make a presentation on his own regarding his petition to the commission. The board may then take questions of the petitioner for clarification. Afterwards, the floor will be open for public comment. I will say this, even if you do not intend to speak, please fill out a speaker card. After public comment, the petitioner will have the opportunity for rebuttal, and then the board will take action. First matter is the approval of the agenda.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to amend the agenda to reverse items 5 and 6 in old business.
Second.
It's been properly moved and second to reverse items 5 and 6. All in favor signify by aye. All opposed, motion carries. Items requested to be removed from the agenda. Item number 3, rezoning map amendment. Anyone here for item number 3? It has been removed from the agenda. Chair will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second. Properly moved and second. Any discussion? Any unreadiness? All in favor signify. All opposed? Motion carries. No items to be withdrawn. There's an item on the consent agenda, which is the approval of the June 25th, 2019 meeting. Should I entertain a quick motion? Properly moved and second. Any discussion? Any unreadiness? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Old business, General Development Plan, Green Island Road. Before you start, Mr. Lonestetter, I'd like to read something on the record.
Mr. Chairman, we've actually reversed the
I'm sorry, you did reverse it. You did. Noah Stables first. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, before I begin, I want to state that the revised plan that you see here was submitted to our office on Friday after the original MPC agenda did go out. So we unfortunately haven't had time as staff to update our staff report. I do have a revised oral report I can present to you, but I want to see if you would like to hear it before I go into that.
So you tell me it came in, you guys have not had an opportunity to take a look at it or go through it. Is that correct?
We had a time to look at it, but we did not do a thorough analysis to revise our staff report that you see in your agenda.
Has the county had an opportunity to review it?
The zoning administrator has. We have not received any comment from engineering or anything regarding. Now, the only change here were the additions of these asterisks here, but the staff report and our motion and recommendation in that staff report remain the same.
Is Mr. McCorkle present?
Yes.
Mr. McCorkle, I'm inclined to continue this since we've not had an opportunity to read the full report to our next meeting.
Ladies, there's one seat over here if you want to sit down.
And you're welcome to take mine as well, please.
That's my inclination.
Well, if you'll just give me a second to address it, I think
I don't want to get into the body of what you're talking about.
Okay. I think what Mr. Lonerstetter was saying is that they don't have time to revise the staff report itself. However, what we did and what we changed was reviewed by staff, and the zoning administrator have agreed that our revised plan meets the requirements for the automatic by right reduction of our lot width. At our previous meeting, y'all had asked us essentially to go back and work with staff and the zoning administrator to try to resolve the issue. It's exactly what we did. One issue we had was the 4th of July holiday week was immediately after our meeting. And so the first time we were able to get staff and zoning administrator and all in the room was July 9th, which was a week ago. And so on July 9th, we met. We've had multiple conversations, multiple emails, had a long, good meeting. We agreed how to resolve the issue. We've resolved the issue. And we had to get our surveyors and engineers to make the changes. We submitted the changes by Friday. And so the issue about shrinking the lot width is not even, I guess, before you really today. The only variance now left is the double frontage lots at the back of the property, which nothing having to do with that has changed since our previous meeting. So I do believe staff has seen it. Zoning administrator and staff have agreed that we've met the requirements. So my understanding was really the only thing left to talk about today was double frontage lots, and nothing in the staff report I think is going to change regarding that issue.
Mr. Lonerstetter?
Yes, sir.
I just don't think we've had an opportunity to review.
And that's your prerogative. We haven't adjusted our staff report. I do, again, have a oral presentation I can provide to you if you'd like to hear it and make a determination. The main change with this project is regarding how the rear buffer and the tree lawn, which is the blue is the tree lawn, and the purple in the back is a buffer. The main change is how those are treated. They're going to be treated more along the lines of common elements, which now adds towards that 25% requirement. So that's the main change that was made, and I think one of the reasons why the petitioners felt that they could be heard today, because a majority of the plan remains the same.
Ms. Jarrett? Yeah.
I'm a little uncomfortable not having seen the staff report as well. I read the reports before the meeting, and not having an updated staff report. It sounds like there was more than a week to do these changes if the applicant had gotten it together to put the changes in. On Thursday, we would have had the report revised and been able to see all of the comments made. So I'm with you, I'm in favor.
Would you like to fashion that in the form of a motion?
Move to postpone this agenda item until the next regular meeting.
When's our next regular meeting?
August 3rd.
Move to August 6th. Continue to August 6th. I have a motion on the table.
Yeah, you speak.
I have one speaker card.
We want to let them be heard. Let them be heard. We want to let them be heard.
What I will do is allow the speaker to be heard prior to.
Are we going to go? Are we moving forward?
I want to know if we're going to get a second on the motion. Is there a second?
It's a second.
Properly moved and second. Any discussion?
I
will.
If we have a speaker card, I don't know. I'm kind of inclined to think that we probably need to move forward. People take off their jobs to come down here.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Further discussion? Any unreadiness? All in favor of continuing? All opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Henry, please be here August the 6th. Is that correct? At 1:30. Matters continued. Item number 5, General Development Plan. Before you begin, Mr. Lonerstetter, I will read something into the record. On June 5th, 2019, Mr. Loughborough sent an email requesting a meeting with myself and the Executive Director, Melanie Wilson, regarding our May 14th, 2019 meeting. I want the record to reflect that we declined to meet with Mr. Loughborough. You may continue, Mr. Longstead.
Thank you. So this project, the Green Island Road project, was before you and has been before you a couple times. At the May 14th MPC meeting, the Planning Commission heard a summary of the report from staff, testimony from the applicant, and comments from the public. The Planning Commission moved to continue the hearing to June 4th and then June 25th in order to allow the county zoning administrator to issue a determination regarding the proposed uses on the site, which are assisted living and memory care. The main question being, are these uses permitted within the PUDR zoning district, which this site is zoned? Due to the retirement of the former county zoning administrator, the county manager named an interim zoning administrator on June 21st, 2019. This interim zoning administrator provided the MPC executive director with this letter you see up here, this determination, on June 24th, 2019, after he, of course, had been named the interim zoning administrator. This letter determines that the proposed uses, again, the assisted living and the memory care, are not permitted uses within the PUDR districts. Therefore, based on this determination, the petitioners would be required to either revise the uses to become compliant with the PUDR district or request a rezoning of the subject property. Because the zoning administrator determination constitutes the official view of the county, and because this view is that the proposed uses are not permitted within the PUDR districts, MPC staff recommends denial of the proposed general development plan. Moving forward, the applicants do have three options. They can revise their development plan with a use that meets the requirements of the PUDR districts. They can request a rezoning to a district which allows the proposed uses, or they can appeal the zoning administrator's determination to the Chatham County Zoning Board of Appeals. Again, we do recommend denial because the use is not permitted within the district. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions of Mr. Longstead? There being none, is the petitioner present? Sir, please state your name on the record, and you have 10 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to need more than 10 minutes. We have an issue today that requires the presentation of much evidence that will need to be considered part of the record. I will do everything I can to speak as quickly as I can.
Thank you, sir.
For the record, my name is Harold Yellen. I represent the petitioner. With me today is Mr. Stephen Loughborough with Loughborough Realty, Amy Sanfilippo with Springer Healthcare, and John Giordano, who is our project engineer with Thompson Hutton. If I could quickly handle a housekeeping matter, there are really now two issues before you. Issue number one is, can we build a continuing care retirement facility in the PUDR? That's the threshold issue. If you decide yes, then we would then present our site plan. If your answer is no, that we are not permitted in the PUDR, then you have effectively removed that discussion from your consideration. So, Mr. Chairman, with your permission, we would like to only discuss whether this use is permitted, and if we could focus on that one issue and limit discussion and testimony to that one issue, I think it makes the most sense. That is, in fact, the threshold issue before you. Mr. Chairman, is that fair?
I'm inclined that you should present your entire case that you wish to present to this board.
Then that will certainly be a much longer presentation, which I'm prepared to do as well. But we're happy to do all of the above.
He's repeating some of the same stuff.
You may proceed, Mr. Young.
I'm sorry, I heard comments,
may
but I wasn't
proceed.
sure from where. Yes, sir. On May the 14th, our petition was continued to allow not the county zoning administrator, but the county attorney to give his opinion regarding our proposed use. We're not quite sure why that request was made of the county attorney, but that was your motion, and we'll come back to that in just a moment.
I don't wish to discuss the motion, Mr. Yellen. I wish to move forward.
Well, that's what I'm doing, and I'm required, Mr. Urban, to present the record because you are recommending that one of my choices is perhaps an appeal, and that is why I'm here to present the evidence before you and to make a record of that evidence. I have no choice but to do it this way.
I think we are aware of how we got to this point, Mr. Young.
Well, let's go on because I'm not sure we are all aware. I would like to state I have respect for the county attorney. I have known the county attorney for a very long time, and I have worked with the county attorney for a very long time. But his letter, which is a part of the record, is shocking in several respects. The county attorney reports that MPC and Chatham County have approved 5 senior care facilities throughout Chatham County. And this is the chart from page 3 of his letter. 3 were zoned PUDIS. 1 was zoned R3 with a density of 11 units per acre. And 1 was zoned planned R3 with a density of 16 units per acre. Mr. Hart has reported to you that the PUDIS is not appropriate for senior care facilities because the district does not recognize any residential uses. Mr. Hart has also stated that the PUDR, or any planned residential, is also not appropriate because it has no terminology indicating that senior congregant care is permitted. The county attorney has concluded that there is one and only one district that permits senior care, and that's the PUDM district. I have taken the liberty of cutting and pasting Mr. Hart's chart from his letter so that you can see the date of these petitions and what was the original zoning. Please note that none of these 5 are a PUDM, which we're now being told is the only district that permits senior housing. Please also note that the 1992 petition, the third one in the list of 5, was originally zoned PUDM 8, and it was rezoned out of the PUDM to a PUDISB. Please also note that the 1997 petition was originally R1, and the PUDM was requested and was rejected by Chatham County Commission and by this MPC. Here are the minutes of that meeting. And you can see finding 4, the PUDM 10 classification would allow the proposed use, but would also allow other alternative building designs and types of multifamily units, which would generate more traffic and other concerns. Footnote 6, in an effort to better address the concerns of residents of Wilmington Island, a PR316 zoning classification under the planned district of the zoning regulations was adopted in lieu of the PUDM 10. I believe, in all fairness to our county attorney, both of these petitions in 1992 and in 1997, Mr. Hart was not the county attorney. At the time, Mr. Tom Mahoney was the attorney, but you can see that one petition zoned to it and was rejected, one zoned away from the PUDM. In 2017, the 4th petition from the bottom, I represented the petitioners of a senior care facility on Old Montgomery Road. That property was rezoned from R1 to R3. Folks, this was just 2 years ago. Many of you who are on this board now were also on that board, where you recommended approval of the rezoning to an R3, and it was unanimously approved by you, and it was unanimously approved by Chatham County Commission. The PUDR and the planned R are virtually the same district. Both are planned residential districts under Section 465 of the Chatham County Zoning Ordinance. And you can see 464-6-.52. The following properties are planned districts. When there's a P before the R, or if the property is identified as a PUD. Both qualify as planned districts under the Chatham County zoning ordinance. I will also share with you something that should come as no surprise to any of you. We regularly meet with MPC staff before I stand in front of you at this podium. NUZO requires it, but we routinely do it. I can tell you that I honestly don't remember in 1997 whether I met with staff, but I do know that in 2017, on behalf of Harmony, I met with staff before coming before you, and Mr. Luffbauer and I met with MPC staff before this 2019 petition. And in fact, my notes reflect that we met with the MPC on December the 5th, 2018, last year.
1 second. I asked you to state your name. You're 7 minutes into this discussion.
We're about to go into whether or not, and I think I've been clear so far, as to why we believe this is a permitted use in the PUDR.
State your reason why you feel it.
We met with staff, and we were told zoning is not the issue, it is a site plan issue only. We spoke informally, not with a formal opinion, with the zoning administrator, Mr. Bob Seebeck, who has been the zoning administrator at the time for 15 years, who said to us, this is a site plan issue only. Even in Mr. Hart's letter to you on the last page, he said, this is just my personal opinion, and I won't read the whole letter to you. It says, we need the opinion of the zoning administrator. That's what we need to do. Let's ask the zoning administrator what his interpretation is. I received this letter on Friday, June the 21st. I immediately picked up the phone and I called Bob Seebeck. I told him, look, you've already given me your informal opinion. I now have a letter from the county attorney saying I need a formal opinion. Can I please get a formal opinion from you? Mr. Seebeck told me that you need to know a few things. He said, number one, I'm at the hospital right now with my wife, and she's very ill. He said, I'm not sure if I'm going to even be back at the office today. He told me also that on Monday, he was going to be giving his notice as the zoning administrator, and that the following Friday, June 28th, was going to be his last day as zoning administrator. I told Mr. Seebeck, your wife is more important. If you have a chance to write a zoning letter, thank you. If you don't have that chance, I completely understand. That was my conversation of June 21st. On Tuesday, I did receive a zoning letter, but it was a zoning letter from Mr. Gregory Anderson, acting as the interim zoning administrator, and it appears that he was asked to confirm the county letter, and he did. The very next day, I received a letter from Mr. Bob Seebeck. That's the one from Mr. Anderson. The very next day, I received a letter from Mr. Seebeck. As you can see, it is on Chatham County Interoffice Correspondence Stationery. It says from Robert Seebeck, Zoning Administrator. And Mr. Seebeck says, and I'll only read the highlight, per Mr. Yellen's request, I am providing my opinion on this topic. It is my opinion that based on allowable uses listed in the Chatham County zoning ordinance, a senior care facility is an allowed use in the PUDR district. I don't know the reasoning why this is not made a part of your packet, but it has not been made a part of your package today. And it seems to me that you should be entitled to look and weigh all of the evidence. And you were given the letter from Mr. Anderson, who I've also known for a very long time, and I suspect he was the interim for maybe a day or maybe 2 days or possibly even 3 days. I don't know the nature of his appointment. But Mr. Seebeck, who was there at the time we filed our petition, who we had spoken with throughout our petition, opined as the zoning administrator, sending me an email from the Chatham County server saying, here's the letter you requested, Bob Seebeck, zoning administrator. Apparently it was not included in your package, and I don't know why. It is my belief that an interim serves as interim until the position is filled. The interim does not replace the position that is still there. So contrary to your letter from the county attorney and from the interim zoning administrator, but consistent with Mr. Seebeck's letter, since 1992, senior care facilities have only been approved in a PUDIS and in a multifamily residential district, never in a PUDM. So the question needs to be raised, why are senior care facilities permitted in the multifamily? And the answer is surprisingly simple. If you look at the analysis of the 1997 decision for Summer Breeze and the 2017 petition for Harmony, these are two rezonings 20 years apart with the same analysis. MPC has consistently stated, the only use that applies in the Chatham County zoning ordinance is homes for aged and children. There is no other use anywhere in the Chatham County zoning ordinance in the use schedule that defines what we're trying to bring to you, except for that. And I've always been intrigued because it doesn't say homes for aged or children, it says aged and children. So I've often wondered, do you have to have old people and young people to qualify? That's how antiquated the ordinance is. But as noted by the MPC staff, in 2016, I won't read all of this. The zoning ordinance uses an outdated term to identify what is known today as a continuing care retirement facility. It is not defined in the ordinance, and this term is also a comprehensive term that also includes children. They go on to state that to avoid the vagueness and confusion, it is necessary to specify what this really is. This is a continuing care retirement facility. It will contain various housing options that will allow senior residents to age in place and include at least two of the following: independent living, assisted living, personal care, or memory care. These housing options allow residents to remain in the community and receive a continuum of care as health-related needs change. In other words, the use is a housing option for seniors. And MPC said it again with the petition of Indigo Run. A continuing care retirement facility is essentially a residential use that will not affect the health or safety of residents, workers, or others within the city. They said it again in 2017.
Mr. Yellen?
So I'll finish up.
Okay.
But I've got to complete this part of the record. Time and time again, you're being told by the MPC staff, this is a residential use for senior housing. What you've received so far is just the opposite. By definition, the PUDR is a residential district, more than 25 acres, that permits multifamily residential, and that includes senior housing. Mr. Hart is absolutely entitled to his opinion, as is Mr. Anderson, as is Mr. Seebeck. But you are also entitled to your opinion. Historically, and in the opinion of Mr. Seebeck, it is very clear that this use is permitted, and if you hold otherwise, you would at best be contradicting the decisions of the last 25 years. But at worst, I fear that 5 businesses are now at risk of having been rezoned to an incorrect zoning district, because all 5 are multifamily residential and a PUDIS as a result of decisions of this board and Chatham County Commission. We are very much aware that this is not an easy decision, but there can only be one finding. We're also very mindful that a lot of people oppose this petition, and they have called you, and they have emailed you, and some of them have met with you.
Mr. Yellen?
Mr. Irvin, you didn't bring that up. You pointed out that we made a request, but there are people behind me who have done that.
I've not met with anyone. Would you please wrap up your argument for us?
Okay. I'll close by saying that this petition is quite simply not a popularity contest, because if it is, you would decide all matters based on the number of people who are sitting in the chairs behind me. What this is a constitutionally protected property right matter, and the right of a property owner to use his or her property as permitted under the law. With that in mind, we would respectfully request, and I'm going to close with my portion concerning whether this is or is not a permitted use. We believe very strongly that Mr. Seebeck is 100% correct. This is a permitted use in the PUDR, and we would request that you make that finding. And as my final housekeeping matter, I began with housekeeping, I'll close with housekeeping. Every case that I've cited to you, every law that I've cited to you, every letter that I've cited to you, I've created a packet of materials which I'll present to you that you can all have a copy of everything that I've shown, because I've had to go through this very quickly. And I'll, with that, make it a part of the proceedings before you. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you so much, Mr. Yellen. Any questions of Mr. Yellen? There being none, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I have several speaker cards, and I'm going to limit that to 2 minutes. And I'll ask that the timer keep time. I'll begin by Mr. Adam Ragsdale. If you would, sir, please state your name.
Good afternoon. My name is Adam Ragsdale. I'm a resident of Chatham County, specifically 7 Loughborough Way in South Harbor. Mr. Gellen's presented quite a bit of information. I'm here in support of the petition. I live about 700 feet from where this proposed development is. So everyone is aware, most of y'all are aware, I served on this commission for 9 years in the capacity of chairman, vice chairman, and secretary. I am a planning professional and civil engineering consultant in Savannah and Chatham County. I've been one for 19 years. Harold already stated all the facts. I don't need to restate those. As a professional planner and as a person that's very much interested in personal property rights, again, I'm in favor of the petition. People have to be aware of what their rights are. They need to be aware of what their zoning is, and they can't expect that rug to be pulled out from underneath them when they try to exercise their due rights. So with that, I'll answer any questions.
Any questions of Mr. Ragsdale? Thank you, Mr. Ragsdale.
Thanks.
I have a speaker card for Don Dykes. If you would, sir, please state your name for the record.
Thank you. My name is Don Dykes. I represent a number of adjoining and neighboring properties.
Taking the microphone.
Again, my name is Don Dykes. I'm with the law firm of Dykes and Norris. I represent a number of neighboring and adjoining property owners near the development. And I wanted to address a few of the things that have been said. First of all, one of the things that was left out, which I think is helpful for the MPC board to see, is this was a copy of a letter, fax, email, I believe from county manager. Apparently, Mr. Seebeck was replaced on Friday, June 21st. So the letter he issued on the 25th, he was no longer representing the county as zoning administrator. He had been replaced. It was no longer his role to give a decision. And whatever he stated had no effect, no bearing, other than something coming from a private citizen. The petitioner's here today trying to get you to make a decision or rule on whether or not this particular project meets the zoning ordinance and whether it's allowed under the PUDR. And that is not the role of this board. There is a zoning board of appeals, and that is the proper forum to hear that. It's in the zoning code. I think it's zoning sections 9.11. And this can be appealed to the zoning board of appeals. It's not to the MPC to make that determination. That's not for y'all to decide. That's for the zoning board of appeals. So that's where the appeal needs to go. Y'all being asked to approve something that's been determined that is not allowed in this zoning ordinance. Now, there was a number of different projects that the county attorney had cited that have been zoned to different zoning districts. The two on Skidaway Island, Thrive, and the Marshes were both zoned PUDR and rezoned from PUDR in 1997 and in 2016. Thrive was only a 3 years earlier. They were rezoned from PUDR, which is what this is, to PUDIS. Now, the PUDM, I think, is what everybody's been avoiding. And the PUDM that Mr. Yellen referred to back in 1992, I doubt is the same text that currently exists. I'm not aware of what the zoning ordinance for the PUDM was in 1992, but in 2019, it has a entire scheme that I'm sure you're all aware of, but requires a conversion plan for senior congregate care housing. And to allow an applicant to come and go under a PUDR or a PUDIS allows them to avoid this particular provision that has been enacted by the county, which requires a conversion plan for just this sort of facility. If this facility is ever converted from a congregate care facility to multifamily, there's supposed to be a conversion plan. And allowing a PUDR to do that, you bypass this entire multi-page plan. So we would submit that this board doesn't have any authority to rule one way or the other on whether or not it's allowed under the zoning ordinance. That's for the Zoning Board of Appeals. And so we would just urge the board to deny the petition.
I'm sorry, very quickly. You said you do represent a group?
I do. A number of adjoining landowners.
Are they present?
Some of them are.
I see one hand went up. I see some more hands. Have you all filled out speaker cards as well? Because what I would ask you to do is to cede your time to Mr. Deitch, since he does. Is that fine with you? Okay, great. Okay. And I would also ask anyone else that is going to repeat what Mr. Deitch has to say, would you kindly cede your time to him as well? Okay? Okay. Thank you. I see some more hands went up. Mr. Deitch?
All right, but now that I've tried to rush everything in 2 minutes, I get told I've got more time. I'm happy to answer questions about that. I think that's a lot of information I've tried to cram into 2 minutes.
Any questions, Mr. Deitch?
But I think it's important to note that the PUDM is one of the later code sections. I presume it was a later version of the zoning ordinance. It has all of the same uses that this particular applicant is seeking to do, and it has a lot more requirements. And what you're allowing, when you allow these other PUDIS or any other type of zoning project to go through, you're allowing them to avoid what apparently somebody thought was important enough to enact in the zoning ordinance. Now, we've heard about this antiquated zoning ordinance, but the term congregate care facility doesn't appear there, memory care, things like that do not appear there. But the ordinance has long had a definition for a care home.
Very quickly, Mr. Deitch, are you wrapping up?
Well, I am.
Okay. All right.
But the congregate care is the same as a care home. It's been defined for years. It's not an allowable use in this district. And we think it's pretty clear cut that this needs to be a different zoning if they want to go forward with this. And I realize that maybe perhaps other projects have not been held to the same standard. Staff may not have done that. Other boards may have allowed it. But the ordinance is there to protect all the citizens. And whether or not other people broke the law, whether other people got something passed that wasn't allowable, doesn't mean that we should just continue to allow this to go on. This is clearly not allowed, and we would just ask that the MPC deny this petition. Thank you.
Any questions, Mr. Deitch? Thank you, sir. I have a speaker card for, and if I happen to call your name, those of you who had already raised your hand saying that Mr. Deitch represents you or has stated your point, kindly let me know. I will pass on to the next person. Jack Robertson? Okay. If you wish to add one more item, please step forward, state your name for the record.
Jack Robertson. Mr. Deitch says basically everything that I would say, but I think it's very important to note that when that PUDM, actually in the definition, if you'll see, it actually spells out senior citizen congregate housing. It couldn't be any clearer. Okay, we've heard there's not a use table with this in it. there's an actual zoning classification with this in it. PUDN specifically says senior citizen congregate care in the definition. That's the only other thing I'd like to point out.
Any quick questions to Mr. Robertson? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I have a speaker card for Dr. Dominique. Is it Brocali? He covered you. Thank you, ma'am. I have a speaker card for a Mr. Ken Mingelsdorf. Thank you, sir. I have a speaker card for a Michael McCracken. Thank you, sir. I have a speaker card for Marilyn Michaels. If you would, ma'am, please state your name for the record, and you have 2 minutes, ma'am.
Yes, I'm pleased to be here. My name is Marilyn Michaels, and I currently live in the Landings. And I am a senior citizen. I am 80 years old. And I have recently started to look for housing for the next phase of my life. And I've begun to look into facilities that include both independent living, assisted living, and should I ever require it, memory care, etc. And I find that there are 2 facilities that are quite reasonable and accessible and very convenient for me. And I feel that there is no need for another one. The Marshes and the new one that's under construction, the Thrive, are perfectly adequate. And we have a serious congestion problem already. We've had a number of very close calls at the main intersection where Green Island would come into Diamond Causeway. And I'm driving. I'm perfectly able to drive. I'm in perfect health. And if I moved to that facility, I would be a driver every day. And I'm sure many of the other people who would reside in that new facility would be drivers. So I've heard lots of arguments that senior housing doesn't include that many drivers, and certainly it would, just as well as other uses of that property. So I'm here to ask you, please, to not approve this. I understand that there are other things that have to go on that have to do with zoning, and I hope that they see that this is not the appropriate use for this land. Thank you.
Any questions of Ms. Michaels? Thank you, Ms. Michaels. I have a speaker card for Pam Boland. If you would, please step forward and state your name for the record, and you have 2 minutes.
Pam Boland, I'm here in support of the proposal. I am a resident of South Harbor. And my concern, and I don't know if my concern can be addressed.
Would you be so kind to move the mic closer to you so we can hear you? Thank you.
Sorry. Anyway, my concern is that there's been a lot of discussion about this property couldn't be in that zoning, and no one has explained that I've seen what would be able to go in there. I think it's important to make, for me to make an assessment about whether this is something I should oppose. It would be necessary to know what else could be in there. I don't know if that means townhomes, condominiums. I don't know what encompasses the zoning that is stated on the property currently. And I kind of feel like that if you are against what's going on, you need to know what the alternative is. And I've evoked this before because when Save Our Sandfly was very concerned about what was going to go in on Montgomery Crossroads, they got together and they wanted to defend their community, and Target left. And then Sam's and Walmart came in. And so I don't know what else would be in there. I don't know what other cars would be in there, what other buildings. No one's discussed that. And I don't know if that's a question that this planning commission can answer, but I think that that's important information in terms of making a decision.
Any questions of Ms. Michaels? Thank you, ma'am. I have a speaker card for a David Hoover. If you would, sir, please state your name for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is David Hoover. I'm here today to speak about Stephen Loughborough. Not that I have no interest in the development before the commission today, as I am a property owner at South Harbor. I actually would prefer the land across from South Harbor remain as it is. However, also being a member of this commission in the past, I recognize that that ship has sailed from the harbor. Unless the mission of this body has changed, if a property use is allowable, then the commission must approve it. So I'm here to set the record straight about Stephen because I've watched emotional appeals to derail this project transform into personal attacks against him. Since the commission's decisions are not driven by emotions, I'm sure emotions will not influence their decision. However, the tarnishing of Stephen's good name should not be left undefended. Admittedly, I am Stephen's friend, but our relationship began as a business relationship. In addition, he was the chairman of this commission while I served as a commissioner. It was out of these periods that our relationship and a friendship grew. I know from firsthand experience that Stephen's mode of operation is the same, whether it's business deal or a personal matter. He operates with unapologetic honesty and relies on his unfettered faith to guide him in everything that he does. To imply otherwise is wrongful assault on his character, which in my mind goes beyond the pale when you're in disagreement with someone about developing a piece of property. By my estimate, Stephen and his company own approximately $15 million worth of property in South Harbor. I think it would be safe to say that he has more to lose than anyone in this room if this project were to adversely affect South Harbor. One more sentence. I hope this commission will disregard with prejudice all assaults on Stephen Loughborough's character and recognize that they are without merit and should not have been made in the first place. Thank you.
Mr. I want to make a statement. One second. I'm going to ask my speakers maintain on the record germane topics about why you are in favor or why you are opposed. That is what I ask for. I do not wish to hear anything about character or anything of the such. We're here to determine whether or not this development is to go through or not. That's all we're here to discuss. I have a speaker card for Mr. Ben Farmer. If you would, sir, please state your name for the record.
My name is Ben Farmer. I'm a resident of Modena Island for the last 31 years. I was the first person in Modena. I've served as MPC for 9 years with 6 people who are sitting up there and 6 people who are sitting down here. I know I've got a limited amount of time, so apparently I'm not going to say all I want to say, but I will say I'm appalled by what's happened here. First of all, I didn't realize that someone could, as an interim appointee, could take over for somebody who's still in office. I know we've been for 15 years. I know he's retired because of family matters, but he was still regardless of what Mr. Smith says, he was still the zoning administrator until Friday of that week. I think this commissioner's already made up its mind about what they're going to do, but that's all right. We'll get the ZBA. But I will say this. The last thing I'll say is that anybody who's known me up there or down here knows that I'm very blunt about what I say, and I always speak what's popular opinion. All these people back here from the landings or wherever they're from have legitimate concerns about everything they brought up. They worry about traffic, tree canopy, water, all that thing. Those things, as this project moves forward, in the land use part, will be handled at an appropriate time by the proper authorities. I understand their concerns. I live out there too. I live out probably more than most of them. I travel those roads. I have to worry about the same thing they worry about. But the fact is, those issues are not a matter of concern for anybody in this room except the people sitting up there. There will be a handle at the proper time by proper authorities. I'm concerned about how this thing's going. I've been around this commission long enough to know that it's not going to be decided here. It'll be decided at the ZBA or in the courts. But I agree with what Mr. Yellen has said. If this thing is denied, then and we go with the record of what's been zoned under other zonings, then we got 5 different developments in this town that are non-conforming uses and could be a problem for them in relationship with their lenders. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Farmer. Any questions of Mr. Farmer? Thank you. I have a speaker card for a Malcolm Harrison. If you would, sir, please state your name for the record, and you, sir, have 2 minutes.
I'm Malcolm Harbison, resident of South Harbor. I know this is a charged friendships, both sides of this question, and it's a tough one. So I'll just speak about my wife and I's personal opinion of this. We are opposed to this. We feel it's our feeling. It's not a political. It's not. We don't know the rules that you're dealing with. We do read them, but we don't know how to interpret them like you do. But we do feel that this is basically a residential commercial venture with 100 employees a day around the clock. That's what I've been told by in meetings here. That it's really not appropriate for where we are. The South Harbor corridor, the Queen Island Road corridor is purely residential, has no real business or commercial element. We just don't think it fits. And so, having said that, I would say one last thing that Mr. Yellen was talking quite a bit about the precedent and history of these zonings, and I don't know a whole lot about that, but I can say this, that in the event you've made 5, not you, but 5 mistakes have previously been made, if that's so, that doesn't mean we have to make a 6th one.
Thank you, Mr. Harbison. Any questions, Mr. Harbison? I would also ask that the crowd refrain from clapping, booing, hissing. I want to move along quickly. I have a speaker card for David Hoover. If you would, sir, please. He already left. Oh, he just left. He already spoke. Okay. He just want to make sure you didn't miss him. I have a speaker card for Emil Miller. If you would please state your name for the record.
Thank you. My name is Emily Miller, and I live on Skidaway Island, and I had the opportunity to address this commission at the May meeting to tell you about my concern for water and traffic and other issues with this development. I'm here today to thank you for listening to us then. The fact that this commission took the time to go and look further into this project really helped to restore my faith in democracy, because I came in here expecting what I saw today, which is powerful people who know one another really well, all kind of patting one another on the back and saying, this is how we do things. And you showed it's not how we do things. You showed that small people can have a say, and I really want to thank you for that.
Thank you, ma'am. Any questions? Thank you. I have a speaker card for Murray Marshall. If you would, please state your name for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. My name is Murray Marshall. I've been a resident of Chatham County, Savannah, since 1949. I've been in the real estate, development, construction, brokerage business since 1964, and I have had the pleasure of serving on this commission. I'm not here to admonish you on anything except procedure. The developer, and I am a developer, I am not retired, I am actively developing, went to the staff and went to the zoning administrator before embarking on spending thousands upon thousands of dollars. And he got an opinion that the project did meet the requirements of the district that he wanted to build it in. The issue of getting a letter or have an opinion on zoning goes far beyond this project. And the action you might or might not take, if it is to take the rights away on the issuance of that opinion, goes into every one of the projects, no matter whether it's multifamily, commercial, or whatever, that requires, the lenders require a zoning letter. They don't require it from the city attorney or the county attorney or this body. They get it from the zoning administrator, and millions upon millions of dollars worth of transactions go down on that basis. These projects that are said, that John Hart's letter says are illegal, they have a valid zoning letter as of the date that they were issued. Are those letters no longer valid? I would say, no, they're very valid, as Mr. Seebeck's letter is very valid. But be very careful, please, that you not throw me. I'm working on a new development, first one in the city of Savannah in quite a while. I've been primarily working in Fort Worth within Effingham County. But I'm working on one right now. And my first step is to reach out to this body, to the staff, and find out, can I do what I want to do? And now, if this is turned down, where am I supposed to go before I spend thousands upon thousands of dollars? Getting a zoning opinion from the zoning administrator has to carry absolute weight. Thank you.
Any questions of Mr. Marshall? Thank you, Mr. Marshall.
Thank you all.
I have a speaker card for Dan Scarborough. Sir, you have 2 minutes.
Hi, my name is Dan Scarborough. I live at 112 Tenderloin Way on Green Island. My issue here is with intended use by the developer, because when I look at it and I'm looking at 100 licensed healthcare practitioners per day, I don't see that as being any verbiage within the PDUR. I do see it within PDUIS, and as stated from SAGES, if you look at it, let me see here, yeah, that's correct. There are 9 facilities that are listed that I could find within SAGES. The other ones there are PU to IS or PU to ISB. There's a couple PUMs and an RIP down there. And what my question is how can you have something that calls out a licensed healthcare practitioner not being allowable in PDUR and then allow it within PDUISB or IS, and then turn around and have these 2 variances. So the variances we're talking about are height and parking. And the parking and height variances would not be an issue if it were zoned properly as PDUIS or M. I'm not sure about M. I haven't looked into that directly. But I know under PDUIS and PDUISB that we wouldn't even be here today. The developer would just be able to go ahead with the project as I see it, because the variances are what are in discussion. I don't know if that's what you're saying, but I request that the MTC go back to the developer and ask that they rezone the property.
Any questions of Mr. Scarborough? Thank you, sir. I have a speaker card for Mr. Max Baldwin. So you have 2 minutes.
I'm Max Baldwin. I lived here at the Landings for about 25 years. And I sort of represent the old people. I'm 86 years old, and I have a lot of friends. I don't have a formal group, but I'm here to tell you there's a huge, huge demand for senior living. The demand outstrips the supply. When the baby boomers going to start to retire, it's going to be all over. Just to give you an example, the Marshes has a 5-year wait for every unit. That is apartment units as well as cottages. The Bishop Gadsden in Charleston won't even take an application. They're absolutely full, and they won't even accept new applications. This demand is real. I personally looking for a place that I'm going to go to live with my wife, and there are very, very few upscale, high-end opportunities. So I would ask that you all give this real consideration to fill a need. Sure, there's traffic. There's probably a need for a traffic light right now. There's been some problems there. Ultimately, there will be a traffic light there. So I don't think the traffic should be entered into this. I'd ask you to address the need, and if it's a viable need, and I think it is, then I recommend you approve it. I can't think of a better partner on the island to develop this than my friend Steve Loughborough. He's a man of character and does excellence in everything he does. He's been on this commission for 7 years, served as the chairman, and has given up his own time and I would ask that you consider approving this today, and let's get on with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baldwin. Any questions of Mr. Baldwin? Thank you, sir. Have a speaker card for Ellen Thomas. If you would, please state your name on the record. You have 2 minutes. Pass. Thank you. Have a speaker card for Scott. Is it Hemley? Helmrich?
Helmreich.
Got you. Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, petitioner, neighbors, and other members of the public. I stand before you today as Scott Helmreich. Born in 1987, through God's provision, I took residence on Skidaway Island, grew up there, and I have lived nearly all my life there thus far. I'm a licensed realtor with 3 years of residential real estate sales experience on Skidaway Island, representing the needs and interests of many buyers and sellers over the course of these transactions. I'm in support of the petitioner and their development plans. The petitioner has no obligation to accommodate anyone's preferred product development choice but their own, being that the proposed site plan is well within their defined use, permitted by its previously determined zoning classification, which would have assessed things like projected traffic and water use from a facility on a property of that size and developed at its maximum permissible density, which clearly the petitioner is not trying to do. The Georgia State Park takes up about a quarter of the island, preserving our wildlife, and is not the only dedicated area for this purpose. We could actually do a lot more in our own yards by converting portions of the lawn into natural areas and planting native plants instead of exotics. Natives require little to no water and provide far superior habitat for native animal populations. As a Skidaway Island neighbor to the Loughborough family and realtor, having worked in competition with Loughborough Realty, I have respect for them and their business conduct as well as their longevity on Skidaway Island and the Savannah community. If my father or I had the foresight and means to buy this piece of land, I would be highly irritated with the unfounded outrage against my plans to develop. Virtually everyone complaining is a neighbor of the Loughboroughs, with many living within the Loughborough development of South Harbor. Realistically, if any of us owned this property, we would be doing the exact same thing, or selling it to somebody coming in with a specific development concept already in mind, ready to max out their investment, taking full advantage of their zoning rights. We'd be fools not to. The Loughboroughs have exercised more than adequate care in their planning of this development and have done so with more delicacy and consideration than most others would. To my neighbor, way to go, great insight and great investment. Thank you for all your contributions to our community. It is unjust to villainize Stephen Loughborough due to this process. I predict that the development will be 100% leased prior to the completion of each phase of construction, even with this packed room and the emails. The people who aren't here will be the ones signing up and to reserve their spot.
Any questions, Mr. Helmer?
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I have a speaker card for David Thomas. I have no further speaker cards. Thank you, sir. Mr. Lonestetter, anything further from you?
And I think we just need to bring it back down to the base level here and consider what the valid or what the interim zoning administrator wrote, who is the acting zoning administrator and was the acting zoning administrator when the letter was written. So in terms of MPC's opinion, we are going with the zoning administrator of the county, which states that the use is not permitted, therefore you cannot approve the plan or you're required to deny it. Any arguments or debate regarding the procedure, if there was a procedural error, should be referred to the Zoning Board of Appeals for their action.
Anything of Mr. Lonestetter? Mr. Yellen?
Mr. Chairman, my rebuttal will be brief. I'd like to address just a few points. It was said to you that Mr. Anderson was appointed the interim zoning administrator. Therefore, Robert Seebeck was no longer the zoning administrator. When the city appointed Pat Monahan as the interim city manager, Rob Hernandez was still the city manager. He was the city manager until his last day on the job. Mr. Seebeck was the zoning administrator until the last day of his job, which was 2 days after I received his letter as zoning administrator. In my opinion, the interim is in place until the position is filled. The interim does not replace the person who is still there. Secondly, we filed this petition. Neither the zoning administrator nor any member of MPC staff had one objection to this use in the zoning district until it was brought up by opposition. I can never recall, and there are people here older than I am who've been doing this longer than I have. But in my 37 years standing before you, I've never seen a petition yanked away like that, where everybody here says it's a permitted use. But hey, we got a thread of hope here. Let's take it away and say it's not a permitted use now. And so here's what we have now. We have an opinion that says the PUDISB is not an appropriate zoning classification. We have an opinion that says that the planned residential district is not an appropriate use, and that the only use permitted is the PUDM, and there is no senior facility zoned PUDM. So I would say to you that I find this to be a very dangerous vote. We would ask that you do agree with the zoning administrator at the time, Mr. Seebeck, but we also ask that you agree with your MPC staff. Your MPC staff has repeatedly said continuing care retirement facility is a housing option. And we know that that housing option is permitted in planned residential districts. Last but not least, we do submit to you that the failure to allow this use in the PUDR is a taking of property. It's a constitutional taking of property. I have raised this objection in the materials that I have provided you. I will say nothing further on the matter. But we would respectfully request approval of this use, as we've noted earlier, and we've gone over ad nauseum. I'll say nothing more, but thank you for your consideration. We appreciate your time.
Any questions of Mr. Yellen? Thank you so much, Mr. Yellen.
Thank you.
Chair will entertain a motion.
Man, discussion.
Motion and discussion.
I make a motion to accept staff's denial of the general plan development.
Motion to accept staff's recommendation has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Properly moved and second. Discussion.
I first and foremost want it to be known, not one commissioner here is questioning the integrity of Mr. Loughborough. His character has not been judged by anybody up here, ever. I want that to be known as a fact. I worked with Steve Loughborough beside him up here for 8 years and couldn't know a finer commissioner, but I want that to be on the record that nobody up here has condemned that man or said anything bad about him. Second, I don't know how in the world this site plan can be compared to Harmony's. I got 2,894 petition signatures on this page. They may not all live in South Harbor. I understand they live at the landings. They have concerns because of the traffic and so on and so forth, just as I do. But these are two different developments. And Mr. Yellen, building a facility that Harmony has done off of Truman Parkway behind a vacant field that used to be a horse pasture, you probably couldn't get 8 signatures out there that would have been against that, because it doesn't even butt up to any neighborhood. It's a different project. It's a different atmosphere. It's a different piece of land. So, to compare what was done in 2017, what we voted on up here, to agree to that facility is no comparison to what the nature is around this project. I wanted to make that clear.
Thank you, Mr. Welch. I saw Ms. Jarrett.
Yes, I wanted to get some clarification on whether Mr. Seebeck was still employed by the county at the time that he wrote the letter.
Yes, Mr. Smith.
The official action for any position with Chatham County, with the exception of my own as county manager and the county attorney, which are both hired and appointed by the county commissioners. My action on the 21st, I appointed Gregory Anderson as interim and removed those responsibilities from Mr. Seebeck. He was paid until the 25th.
And he was no longer
that is the official
zoning
director.
administrator.
Yes, and that is my choice as county manager.
Okay.
And that
Another
was
thing I wanted some clarification on. Mr. Anderson, actually, is two of the things. Mr. Anderson did not actually state the correct zoning classification for that property, did he? He just stated that PUDR was not the correct zoning classification. It was the attorney that said the correct zoning classification was PUDM, correct?
It's an
Okay. All right. One other question I have, and it's probably for staff, is if PUDR remains PUDR and they choose not to move forward with a senior care facility, what is their by right unit? What can they build there by right?
PUDR, the R stands for residential.
Understood.
It's primarily single family, detached single family. I don't unfortunately have the zoning use table in front of me, but any use specifically listed within that table would be permitted by right, or unless there's a asterisk or a B would be a special land use.
So the density could be the same.
Allow me to very quickly steer us back in.
Yes.
The issue is whether or not, we're not talking about density.
Gotcha. Okay.
That'd be something else separate. Any further discussion, Ms. Jarrett? What? Mr. Manigault?
I'd like to make a statement to everybody that's sitting here and all the people that live in that area. When you question the integrity of people, it is clear that the United States has changed drastically, and they use this as a cover-up. That is terrible, and it's not permitted. So get it out of your mind. We're not questioning his integrity. We are here with guidelines, and we try our best to live by them as a non-paid commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Yes, Mr. Cook.
Is it true of staff that the petitioner needs to come back and reapply for a different zone?
If it is the intent to stick with this use, the assisted living and memory care, then a rezoning would be required to a district that permits that use.
So they would have to come back and
yes, sir.
For a new rezoning.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Any further questions? Any further discussion? I'm sorry. Yes, Mr. Cole.
The only thing that I would wish to add is I understand from the development standpoint the frustration with the fumbling between two different opinions. But I feel that we as the board have to take the overarching opinion of the active zoning administrator, and that is what I believe our staff have done. And we are not zoning professionals, our staff are. And we've been given a recommendation that I think is accurate.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, I just want to ask one. Are you saying that they should reapply for PUDM zoning?
We have the zoning administrator, that the letter that you have states that it's not permitted in the PUDIS. A PUDM is what is suggested at the zoning administrator, but we always advise that the first thing that should be done is to get a zoning administration confirmation letter that a use is permitted. And the letter that you have in front of you was written last month, not before the project started, but was written last month.
Further discussion? Any unreadiness? All in favor of the motion signify by show of hands. All opposed? Motion carries. Next matter on our agenda is regular business, item number 7.
I make the motion we take a 5-minute recess. 2 minutes?
No, it's not going to be long.
Well, then, go on.
That was what I was trying to say.
This is going to take 5 minutes.
Okay.
All right. Item number 7, regular business. Mr. Lonestetter.
Wireless communication facility. Oh, man.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This item is a petition from AT&T and ANSCO seeking approval of a small cell wireless network master plan throughout the city of Savannah. The phase in front of you today consists of 19 antenna sites, also known as nodes. The Savannah Wireless Telecommunications Facilities Ordinance states that the MPC must approve a master plan for small cell installations and review factors such as location, height, visual impact, and lighting. You can see here a map of the entire system depicting the 19 nodes, a majority of them clustered around the downtown historic district and the Victorian Historic District. There is an interactive map that you have access to as well if you'd like to zoom in to see the exact location of the sites. 10 of these nodes are located within the boundaries of the Savannah Historic District. One is within the Victorian District, and the others are spread throughout the city of Savannah and other locations. The nodes consist of replacement light poles as well as mounts atop existing utility poles. For the petitioners, the purpose of this system is to serve areas that are already have coverage, but where demand is too high for the supply. So these are areas where that have higher demand than the existing network can support. This coverage map here shows the areas after the installation of the 19 nodes. The blue are areas that will continue to be served by AT&T networks that are not currently experiencing capacity issues, so they will not be receiving additional capacity from the nodes. The red areas are areas that will continue to be served by AT&T network towers, but will continue to experience capacity issues. The green depicts areas that will be served by low-powered small cell antennas, and the purple are areas that will be served by medium-powered antennas. There are closer up images within your packet here. As required, the petitioners have submitted site plans and photo simulation drawings of the proposed nodes. There will be two light pole mounts. If I can get to that page. There we go. So there will be two new light poles here, while the rest will be poles, existing poles with attachments on top of them. The proposed structures do not require additional lighting or markings. We do note, however, that the Wireless Telecommunications Facilities Ordinance states that the height cannot be increased more than 5 feet above the existing pole. On 9 of these existing poles, the height is proposed to increase by 5 foot 3 inches. So the petitioners are requesting a variance of 3 inches for 9 of these poles. The Wireless Telecommunications Ordinance does grant the MPC authority to approve additional height beyond the maximum allowed, quote unquote, if findings can be made that the siting of the proposed nodes are appropriate to the context of the proposed location. MPC staff does find that the additional height is necessary to safely attach these nodes and the mounts to the pole, and that the additional 3-inch height is visually appropriate in all of the areas. Therefore, we do recommend approval of that 3-inch height waiver for the 9 affected nodes. For the certificates of appropriateness and for the nodes that are within the bounds of the Historic District and the Victorian District, historic certificates of appropriateness were required. The HDBR did approve COAs for 10 of the nodes on May 8th, 2019, with several conditions relating to the color of the poles, as well as the color of the mounts on top of the existing wood poles. The MPC Historic Preservation staff also did approve the single node within the Victorian District without any conditions. As a final note, as part of the Wireless Telecommunications Ordinance, a third party is required to review the system for compliance with our ordinance. At the time that we wrote the staff report, our third-party consultant hadn't provided their review. We did get a copy of their review this morning. They had some minor concerns or minor conditions relating to providing additional information, such as FCC compliance, as well as noise, making sure that it meets the noise ordinance. But because you didn't have a chance to review that report, we as staff recommend that you incorporate their conditions as part of your motion. So upon finding that the proposed small cell master plan is in substantial compliance with the zoning ordinance, MPC staff does recommend approval of both the requested height waivers, which are listed in our recommendation to you. That'll show up shortly. And we do recommend approval of the AT&T small cell master plan for these 19 locations, subject to the following conditions. One, that based on the COA approval, new light posts within the Savannah Historic District shall be Savannah green. Two, again, light posts within, existing wood posts within the Savannah Historic District shall be brown. Three, that all conditions outlined in the third-party consultant's review shall be satisfied. And four, that the MPC executive director may refer the small cell master plan back to the MPC board for reconsideration if the third-party consultant's review finds that the plan is not in substantial compliance with the wireless telecommunications ordinance. Therefore, their comments are incorporated as part of those conditions. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Question, Mr. Lawrence. There being none, is the petitioner present?
No. I don't. My name is Gary Sanchez, and I'm with AT&T, and don't have any real prepared presentation for you this morning. Just wanted, or this afternoon, wanted to make sure that you knew that we were here to answer any questions that you have concerning our petition. I think Mr. Lawrence had.
Mr. Welch. I guess one of the concerns in our pre-meeting was how these are fastened to the pole. Withstand, let's say, hurricane wind. Will they blow off, or they?
Okay, and I have the gentleman here who designed the, or helped design these and filed the permit. You want to answer that one?
Okay. Just want to know how stable they are.
Yeah. My name's David Murphy. I'm with AT&T. I'm one of the design engineers. The rating for the attachments for the wood poles are 150 miles per hour wind, and that's all we have as far as the rating on that portion of it. I'm sorry. Any other questions as far as? Well, in addition, we do also do an independent test on any wood poles that will do a simulation of any structure that's added to it. We refer to that as OCAL. It's a industry standard for attachments, and we would certainly come back and request a replacement of any poles that we found to be defective or any.
Mr. Madigan and Ms. Milton.
Well, looking at the standard of the poles that you're using now, number one, they're thin, no support whatsoever. The wood poles are much larger and have support. So, how do you put together the standards of 100? What's the wind distance? 150.
The rating on the mounting materials,
yes,
and the way that they are mounted to the wood poles,
yes,
that was first my design.
Yeah,
is by the company who provides these for us. Is up to 150 miles per hour.
All right, let's assume that everything works.
Yes.
And let's assume that one of them collapsed on somebody's house. Who's responsible?
That I'm sure would have to go be looked at by some legal department as far as.
But you would be responsible if you approve it and the company design it. That's my concern, because they are thin. And I've seen it because we have a couple in our neighbor on the south side. And it's just standing up straight like a piece of nothing with no support as far as I'm concerned.
Well,
but I'm not here to criticize what you're saying.
Oh, no. I'm just trying to think of a way I might to explain it.
Yeah, and I think that David said it correctly, is that if something like that happened, God forbid, we would definitely have to look into what happened with that, if there was a failure in our estimation of it, in our studies, or if something else happened.
Thank you.
Let me move this along quickly. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Milton. I'm so sorry.
Can either of you explain to me what G5 is?
5G. That's probably outside the scope of this. Yeah. So the small cells that we're installing here are 4G LTE thing, but Ms. Milton, we can talk later. I'll try to explain a little bit of it to you.
This will help support advanced technology.
Mr. Sanchez, I do have one question. Are you in agreement with staff's recommendations, including their special stipulations?
Yes.
Okay.
One little question. Can you co-locate on these small cells as well as you can on the towers?
The poles can be co-located upon. However, based on the technology, you have to have a certain separation from antenna to antenna. So it depends on how far you can get the antenna up, and then how much separation can be done on the pole and still be able to radiate.
Mr. Welch,
I was gonna make a motion.
you may proceed.
I was gonna make a motion to accept staff's approval of the requested height waivers for the following nodes that are listed.
Anybody here to speak on it?
Motion to approve staff's recommendation has been properly moved and second. Any discussion?
Do you have any speakers?
I'm sorry, I do have some speaker cards.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I have one speaker card. Ernie Brown. I'm sorry, sir.
Very sorry.
You're a member of the public and we'd like to hear from you.
Yes.
Please state your name for the record.
My name is Ernie Brown. I live, I'm sorry, I have allergies. I live in 313 East Liberty Street, and I'm in behalf of my wife, Simona Perry, and I. We have a problem with the knot that is behind our house. It's health reasons for this. The reason is our deck is only 15 feet, 1-5, from the proposed node. My desk where I work, because I work from home most of the time, is 25 feet from it. There has not been, to the best of my knowledge, a full-blown health risk for the chronic long-term exposure for this type of high frequencies. I highly recommend the commission to check to see a full-blown risk assessment. A lot of health, specifically. A lot of towns are being very skeptical of these small antennas from the health reason. I'm a techie guy. I like and I'm flying on TNT. I'm extremely happy with them. But when you put something that it will emit radiation, the frequencies, at 15 feet from wherever I spend time with me and my family, I have a problem. There are more than 20 cities that are reviewing this and have modified, in the United States, they have modified the way they're going to do it. Beside that, my neighbors is Vincent Academy, which is, the gym is next to it where there's a lot of kids walking around. Now, if you face my house and you select the next pole, that will buffer my neighbors and my family at least with 100 feet. I don't know what is the chronic exposure or the distance that you will be safe in this thing.
I will say this, that is beyond the scope of this board, but we do appreciate your comments. Are there any questions of Mr. Brown? Thank you.
Where exactly did you say you live?
313 East Liberty Street. And
what?
Liberty.
In historical district. And it's like 1-5. You move it. My neighbors and I will have much better chance of getting any side effects of this thing.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. We have a proper motion and has been second. Discussion from the commissioners.
Can that one pole be moved?
You can pull it out if you want.
We have a motion and we have a properly second motion. Discussion.
The only thing I would say is that you should speak to the representatives to see if
that is beyond our purview at this point. Question that you raised. We have a proper made motion and second. Any further discussion? Any unreadiness? All in favor? I wouldn't move that pole. One. I'm sorry. Let me get a count. 6. All opposed. Motion carries.
I would suggest we talk to the AT&T.
But that's not under our purview.
I know. I don't.
Vetted this with the
Ms. Everett, I need your opinion very quickly. Ms. Southern says that we should have withdrawn our motion.
to allow the public to speak, and then allow the eight members of AT&T to speak to this concern, and then redone the motion.
And my thought is that it's beyond our purview to discuss the health issues of where we are on this.
Well, I missed you. Can we ask that you speak a little bit louder?
I'm sorry. I was saying that the question, the health concern is beyond the purview of this board.
I disagree.
And we're not at a point where we can discuss it. If it was in our petition, a part of it, I think that would have been proper. That's why I allowed the vote to go forward. I'm going to go into adjournment in order to go into executive session. I'm sorry, I have one other item, nominating committee. I'm going to appoint the following persons to the nominating committee: Karen Jarrett, Lacey Manigault, and Mr. Ellis Cook. Those will be a member of our nominating committee going forward. We are now.
Can I ask what's the makeup of the nominating committee? Is it just those three?
Yes, sir, unless you'd like to be a part of it.
I just was asking who else.
Yes, that's it.
Come on.
Anything further? I'm going to go into executive session. We're going to adjourn.